Artist Elizabeth Seaver produces a great variety of work in many different mediums, and we're very happy to have an opportunity to talk with her today. Elizabeth, we're so delighted to be here in the studio, in the variety of studios, I should say, here at Liberty Town. This is such a wonderful place to come to. And you've had your studio here for how long?
For 4 years.
Ah, great.
Since September of 2006.
Good.
So.
And I think I'm very much aware of the fact that it's very close to the entrance.
Yes.
So I find myself wandering into your studio quite often. And there's so much to see and so much to make you smile, and we'll talk about that in a little while too. Reading some of the biographical information about you, though, I was very taken by the fact that you said you loved to create at an early age. All kinds of creation, or specifically art? Or?
I think lots of drawing with all kinds of media that I could put my hands on, and then also some writing. I enjoyed writing stories, and I'm hoping to add more writing to my work coming up.
Wonderful.
So
yeah, sort of dual purpose.
Yes.
You've got the illustrator.
That's right. That's right. So that has really been something I have on the plate for 2011.
Oh, that's terrific.
So,
well, let's talk about those early years, though. Did you have a lot of influence at home? And were there other people in your family who were artists or liked to draw? Or?
Not my immediate family, but my father's grandmother was a painter, and that we have paintings of hers that we've been, taking care of as time has gone by. And she was painted on the border of Texas, and so some of her best works are bluebonnets, which are some of my favorite. I'm from Texas too, so born there, and so they are.
Well, did you get to know her? Did you?
Never did. But my father told lots of stories about her and going on painting trips with her by rivers, and it was during the Depression, and so they went very cheaply, but had lots of fun, and he got to watch her paint, and he enjoyed, loved those stories about her.
And of course, during that period of time, it was a terrible time for the economy, but it was a great time for artists.
It was.
It was one of the few times, I think, when there had been widespread governmental interest in promoting the arts. And unfortunately, we seem to have lost a lot of that, but
I'm afraid so.
Because there were not other jobs, artists were working, and
she painted China, for instance,
really?
And we still have some of that work as well. So
it was a practical pursuit, creative pursuit as well. And I think that's been typical of your work also, as I read. You started off with photography and printmaking, did you not?
I did. When I first left college.
Where did you go to college?
I went to Smith College.
Did you major in art?
I did not. I majored in government. And what does one do with a government degree? Well, I taught, and then worked in a regional blood center. And so when I taught school, I wasn't making very much money, and so I made my own thank you cards, and I began to cut potatoes, actually, to make prints out of. Oh,
how wonderful.
And my brother saw that, decided I needed to do something more permanent, that on a surface it didn't rot, and so he gave me his printmaking tools and a block, and I taught myself how to do that.
A linoleum block?
A linoleum block. And so I did that on my own for a long time. And then I stopped teaching for a while and went to work in the communications department at the Gulf Coast Regional Blood Center in Houston. And
there's an art pursuit for you.
There you go. And I love that because talk about practical, like you say. I actually made film strips and I mean, it was a long time ago now, but things that promoted the blood center, and I took photographs at big events, multi-gallon donors and so forth, and they sent me to community college to learn how to take photos and develop them. They had a dark room at the.
How wonderful!
So I really enjoyed. I mean, that really. Same, sort of a similar process. The block printing, very graphic, the black and white photography too. So I really enjoyed adding that to my repertoire. But,
So interesting that you mentioned black and white particularly, because certainly if anyone looks at your work now, the color is brilliant.
It's true.
And it really
different.
captures you as you look at the pieces. Was there a period of development there from black and white to color? Because your thinking, I'm sure, must be very different.
I think they each really inform each other because you're a painter as well, so you know that having a value study is
Right,
really
and of
important.
course light and dark and shadow and so forth.
And so having that background, I think, made a really good transition to color. But I really didn't start working in coloring and colored work and paints until I moved here in 2000. And I began to take classes just with local artists, Johnny Johnson and Karen Richards. And then the last one I took was actually with Bill Harris with oil paint, because I'd not done oil paint before. But so I guess it's only been about 10 or 11 years that I've had color in my work. So
yeah, and learning to use new materials as well.
Yes.
I don't think people think of that particularly. You know, they sort of give you think in a broad, sweeping way of art,
Right.
and don't realize how many different aspects of it there are, and how many different mediums, and learning how to use different mediums and different materials.
And it takes a long time.
It does.
You know, people often ask me, how long did it take to paint that? Well, let's see, 50 years, and I don't know, but it's a sort of a sum of all your experiences
Of course.
as a creative person. So it's hard, and I don't tick how many hours something took
Oh, I
to
don't think
make.
you can.
I don't think you can either.
Because your thought process is going on all the time, and that might be years before you actually produce something.
Or finish something. A lot of
That's
times
true.
I'll put something aside. I'm not sure where I'm going next with it, and I'll watch it. I really call it watching to see, where will I go next? How will I finish the idea that I have? And I love that multimedia approach, because I think it's where art is really exciting these days. All the different things, how you can take a piece of work and finish it a million different ways, and have a million different pieces of art. So
Well, another interesting thing I read was that you like the mistakes.
I do.
Talk about that, because some people don't.
Right. I started, I am a perfectionist, believe it or not, with that having been said, but I think I finally figured out about myself as an artist that if I did not get over that and find a way to work through that perfectionism, I wouldn't do art. I would be a bundle of nerves, and it wouldn't be fun. And art has got to be fun, at least a part of it. It's hard work too, but it's that sort of working with the mistakes was one way that I found. I could stop and say, okay, well, this was not what I had intended, but let me stop and look at it and see what I see next. And I will have had a particular idea, and it'll change. It'll go in a completely different direction because of some serendipitous, mess or whatever.
Well, yes.
So,
But do you think it's perhaps typical of your work, or more typical of your work perhaps, than the artist who works from a subject, for instance? You seem to be able to work from the ideas you have in your mind.
Yes.
That's a different approach.
It is, and I have worked from photographs or used photographs for a part of a painting, but I do enjoy the sort of process of painting that leads me to the end, that and takes me away from the photograph, takes me away from super realism. So though I can do that, it's not where my heart sings, so that's the way the mistakes take me, or just seeing it a different way. Sometimes I'll take a piece that is half started, and it may be a little bit abstract too, and I'll turn it. I'll turn it upside down, sideways, and look to see whether there's a different way or a better way, to finish it than the original way I had seen. So
I think that's a very interesting thing to know. The fact that an artist is not limited by the obvious. A camera is. Mm-hmm. And well, even there, cameras are becoming, or people handling cameras are becoming more creative and being able to do more things as the technology has changed. But certainly with producing art, you start with a blank canvas or a piece of wood or whatever surface you're going to paint on, and then suddenly there is something there that is a visual conversation with your piece and with the people who are going to be looking at it.
And the materials are always, the variety of materials that I like to bring to it always provide a new, a little voice almost, in the conversation. But you're right, I like the idea that, I have an idea and I get it on canvas in a particular way. And I know that there are artists who are very attached to their work. Almost like they call them their babies almost, and it's hard for them to release them. And I'm very different from that. Once I've had the conversation and it's up there, I really disengage. And people ask me, well, which is your favorite? Well, it's the one I'm working on right now. It's my next one.
Yeah, so, that's very hard to say.
But that's I know that I'm different from a lot of other artists that way.
Well, it's interesting to hear how an artist approaches his work or her work, because it is so different, and the opportunity for variety and differences are as great as the numbers of people who are producing them.
Absolutely. I think that's and the people who come to see them.
Yes.
It's people want to know what I was saying, and I can tell them, something, but that's only part of it. I really think that, the conversation that's most important is between the people who look at it and it, what they see and what it is in them, and so.
Well, that's what makes it exciting for the viewer too. You talk also about capturing the attention of the viewer, but then hoping that they were expecting them to move into the painting or move into the piece of work.
Yeah.
Yes, stay and explore and find other things in it than just the obvious first experience of just looking at it.
Yes.
Is that because what you create has greater depth than just what you put on the surface?
I hope so. I don't. A lot, I think, of what happens when you create is subconscious. I don't think, and I think sometimes the most interesting parts of the painting are things that I did not intend in a lot of ways. I think when I get started creating, and it's really going well, I mean the best possible situation, I am in another place, so that my conscious mind is disconnected a little bit from my hand in a way. It's very strange because I can finish a session and look, and there's something there
that I
hadn't expected. Yeah, and it's not that it's better or whatever, but it's just not intentional in a lot of ways. So it's and I think that's what keeps it fun for me too. That it's because it's about the process.
Yeah. It's wonderful to kind of think of an artistic piece as a living, breathing entity.
It talks to me.
It talks to you, right? Interesting conversation.
Yeah.
But that's what makes it so exciting. And I think the fact that, you have to be able to draw well, I think, to be a good artist. Sometimes you look at especially an abstract piece, and you wonder whether this individual really does draw well because of the result is all over the place. There is a kind of discipline behind it all, and I think you have to get through that discipline in order to get to the ultimate result.
Right.
And it is a process, a beginning to end process that is quite involved sometimes. And especially, I think, when you're working from your imagination rather than just the subject that you're looking at.
But the same rules apply. I think for abstract painting and for super realistic painting, you're still looking for the value. You're looking for good composition. You're looking for depth a field, or not. I mean, not all paintings need that, but I think the same art rules apply, whether there's an identifiable subject in the canvas or not.
Yeah.
And I think you can tell then people who have had that training, their abstract work is, has the power, of those rules. So.
Well, do you find that certain mediums are more challenging than others to work with? Certain materials have limitations that you didn't expect or didn't anticipate. Does that lead you to select things that you particularly have as favorites, or?
I do, and I have tried. I have not tried clay, so I've not done ceramics, and I've made a decision. Sorry, Dan. But I made a decision not to do that just because I have done so many other things that I was really in a place where I'm ready to narrow my focus a little bit. But I found watercolor very challenging.
It's extremely challenging. And of course, because it dries immediately, once you put that stroke down, that's it.
That's it. And it's a different way of working too. You tend to work light to dark rather than dark to light. And I think I like to work dark to light. I don't know. But I do find acrylic and oil to be a more forgiving medium, and it helps because I like to work, stop and look, change, stop and look, change, stop and look. Those mediums work better for me.
Well, that's true. You really can't do that with watercolor.
No, you really need to kind of know where you're going and take step by step, and so I find that doesn't suit my style.
One thing that you mentioned, which I thought was particularly interesting, you talked about when you first came here, taking classes from other artists. I think maybe people think, if you're already an artist, why do you have to take classes from other artists? Surely you know as much as they do. But talk about that experience, because that's something I think many people do here.
Yes, they do, and we see growing numbers of people taking classes with each other, which I think that's wonderful. I think people take classes for several reasons. One of the nice things about a class is that you've got the camaraderie, you've got the company of other people who are creative, and it's very nice to have their input on what you're doing, the structure of the class, all those things. And then, usually you're learning new media, you're being introduced to new materials and ways of working. So I think that's the big attraction of a class, those two things. Because I don't think we ever stop learning as artists. There's just no way. If you stopped learning, you stopped growing and pushing yourself, and you just have to keep on, So.
And then there's a kind of inspiration in the atmosphere.
Exactly.
Being here at Liberty Town, where you have how many studios?
We have 25 to 30 studios and 60 artists.
Right. There is so much stimulation that you can find all around you, and every time you see another piece that's been created by another artist, there's something new to find.
Exactly.
It's a great learning experience all the way around, and a great experience from viewer's standpoint. Even if you don't learn anything, you still experience something, and that I think is important. You come away from a piece that you look at and find captures your attention and involves you as a very great experience. It's more than the obvious. So I looked at this.
Yeah.
Okay, it's got red and blue in it.
But it can be restful. It can be. It can really make you think about something you hadn't thought about in that way before,
That's
or
very true.
It raise emotions that you hadn't expected.
Yeah.
So, and people come in all the time and say, there's such a great feeling here, and there is. It's a really alive place. And you'd think that all our work would start to look alike or something, and it doesn't.
No, not at all.
So it feeds our souls to be the independent artists we are. So,
well, one thing about the reaction you have when entering your studio is that I don't think I've ever walked in there without smiling.
Good. That's the point. Yes.
I think there is a happiness about the way in which you work and the way in which you produce the subject matter for us to see. It does make you smile, and it does make you feel happy and pleased to look at things. And interestingly, your subject matter, though realistic in a sense, I mean, these are real subjects, are very whimsical and perhaps more creative than just stopping at the realistic reproduction. That, I think, is a particularly interesting experience for the viewer.
Thank you.
It truly involves you, and you can't help it because of the way in which you look at things. And I'm also interested in the selection of subject matter, because you do a lot with birds, for instance. Real ones, imaginative ones, all kinds of birds. Is that an area of interest for you?
It's that when I was younger, all my elderly relatives, including my poor old parents in their 30s or something, were interested in watching birds, and they would, get up early in the morning and listen for sounds, and go out with their binoculars and their little stools. And I thought, man, I'll never do that. That is the dumbest thing I ever saw. And I love it. When I got to be, in my 30s, we live in a Texas flyway right there along the coast, and so lots of birds migrate 2 times a year there, and so we see lots of interesting things. And I love to watch. I'm much better at finding the birds in the trees, which can be very tall, by their behaviors. And so I began to sort of think about that, and my birds behave like people I know or something. I'm really I'm actually giving them more human. They wear shoes, some of them, hats, but I do love. I love that, everything about that. The being outside. I love to be outside, and the colors and the behaviors and the beautiful sounds they make, and so it's just sort of morphed, to be very strange, but fun.
Well, I'm going to take you to another subject,
okay,
which is about as far removed from birds as I can think of.
Okay.
Cupcakes.
Yeah. Well,
okay, what's the interest in cupcakes besides delicious?
That's it. That's a lot of it, and just and why I put birds and cupcakes together, I don't know. But I think just exploring the silly, and I think that's a lot of it, and just. I don't know.
Because you're right on the edge of popularity now. Everything is cupcakes.
It's true.
I don't know how many television programs have suddenly appeared on the Food Channel about cupcakes and cupcake entities.
Taking the place of wedding cakes.
And taking the place of wedding cakes, yes. Cupcakes everywhere. I mean, it used to be something you got as a kid when
That's right.
you were hoping that your mom had baked something like that, because it's small and you can take it away and have one right away.
Except now they're getting giant.
That's true.
And of course, my paintings are a little giant too, but I think, I like sweet things too. So that's
of course. Well, that goes along with happy things.
Yeah, that's right. So,
that's quite wonderful, and you've done a lot with your cupcakes, including wonderful greeting cards. I must say you have really put a lot of practical application to your work. And you have a number of examples of it in your studio. Of course, you have the magnets, and you have other variety of things that are not what we would
think of as art, or
think of
necessarily
as
art, right.
But they are artistic reproductions, but in other things that are useful in a different way, or enjoyable in a different way, and that I think is interesting too.
I like it. I like my work to be approachable, I guess, or acquirable if people like it, and sometimes most people can't afford a big painting, and so
you can always have a magnet on your refrigerator.
You can always have a magnet. You can have a card, and a lot of people tell me they frame my cards. And
yes,
are you one of them? So it's and I like that. I like young people to be able to come in and find a little print, or to be able to wear a pin, out of my studio that is something they can afford and they like. So That's
and
right.
it certainly improves your life in many different ways. And when you have practical things that you handle every day, I mean, how nice to be, you don't do mugs, but how nice to be able to have your
Right.
cup of coffee out of a mug that's been produced by an artist.
And you know who that artist is.
Exactly.
And you know that it just really gives you a connection to your things, you know, which otherwise would be kind of cold and just
Sure.
useful. Yeah.
And then having the pieces that you do, of course, around makes it delightful and enjoyable all the time. It's great to have the practical along with the
It's been
very
fun to try to
creative.
figure out how I can, you know, make a more practical line from what I do, and it's been relatively recent. Not the cards, but the pins and the magnets. So
Well, a lot of people will ponder for a long time about how a piece of work hanging on a wall can be used in their home. But you don't have to ponder about a pin or a magnet or whatever. You know what it is, and you use it.
That's
and
right.
There it is.
That's right. That's right. Very easy.
Right. Well, Elizabeth, do you find that you keep looking for different ways in which to produce your art in a practical sense, or I use the word practical loosely, but in a way that is different from the obvious of just looking at it and enjoying the visual impression?
Yes, and in a way, that's a little bit limited. It's been harder to find that. I'm not. I know a lot of people make prints of their work from printers, not an original print, but and I'm not usually. I don't think I'm going to do that. I like the idea of original art, whether it's on a pen or a card or a painting, and so I have worked hard to find those things, and I will keep looking. I'll tell you what I do like to do is I like to find things that might ordinarily be thrown away and try to incorporate that into what I do. And one of the things I've done lately is St. George's Church is the church that I go to, and they did a lot of renovations, and part of it involved taking down a part of the roof that had been there. So there were all these tiles. Now they're not the ones from the time it was first built, but from the 50s, from the last big renovation. And somebody said to me, "Can you use these?" And I said, "I'm sure I can." And so I began to paint on them, and I made pins out of them and little plaques, and so smaller pieces of art. But I do like to find ways to recycle or
That's
reuse
wonderful.
things.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times, an opportunity will come like that, which I hadn't thought of before. Make me think of new ways to create. But
you also it mentioned, and I have not seen any of your work this way, mentioned doing digital work. So I'm assuming that involves the computer and producing original work using the computer.
yes. For a while, I was using my own work and my own photographs to add to mixed media pieces that I was doing. There were several printmaking techniques that involved printing with, like putting down a layer of gesso or clear caulk, believe it or not, and using a Xeroxed picture to print on there. You can rub it on that, let it dry, wash off the paper, and you've got whatever your image is on there. It's not digital as a lot of people are thinking about it these days, I think. And I've moved away from that for now. Doesn't mean I might not go back to it someday,
Right.
but it was sort of another way to use my original work, but change it up,
Well, as
so-
technology changes too, it gives you an opportunity to explore more things as well. You can make use of just about anything and everything creatively if you just let your imagination go and,
It's true.
and see how this will work. But you do already do so many things that are away from the obvious. And also work with others. I had read that you worked with the Spinners and Weavers on a project that they had.
Yes.
Talk about that a little bit, Elizabeth,
We had
'cause that's interesting.
Oh, it really was. It was the brainchild of another artist here, Lynette Reed, and she decided, because she's both a member of Liberty Town and a member of the Spinners and Weavers, that it would be interesting to do a show where Spinners and Weavers were paired with Liberty Town artists, and then they created either things in response to each other's work, created a single item together, or had individual responses to a single item, that they were created a piece of art about. And so we had that show, I guess, 2 falls ago, and it was fascinating to see what everybody did. I don't know if you've seen the dragon up front over my studio.
The dragon's wonderful.
That's
yes.
one of the pieces. I worked with Tal Landau, and she sews, and she had an interest in traditional Tibetan wear, and so we created a Tibetan vest where I printed the fabric with my block prints, and she sewed, and she wove a beautiful panel for the front. So we created this garment out of all these different elements, and it was beautiful, and we learned so much about each other and each other's work. We didn't really know each other before, and to collaborate with somebody else, you really get to know a lot about them. So that was really fascinating.
There was another interesting project I read about, and that was the one that involved Claudia Emerson's class at Mary Washington.
Oh, yes.
The poetry class. Talk about that.
They do, I think their culminating activity from her class is to create a blog that's both visual art and written word. And so several times I've been asked to create, may they use my paintings for the blog, and so I know they did about 3 years ago, and then a group asked me at the end of last semester as well.
So are they writing about the pictures, your pictures?
I don't think so. I think it is meant to be sort of separate categories. But I think that Claudia probably wants them to go into the community and have conversations with artists and to have the experience of, I had to sign a release, so they had to get the release to me, and so there was all the business of it and everything. So they had that experience as well. But so it's like an online magazine is what it is, I think.
Oh,
so
great.
Yeah.
Great. So there are many opportunities in many directions. And if they come up, you're ready.
I'm ready. I'm there. I'm all about it. Yeah.
That's quite wonderful. Well, are you working in a specific direction at this point that is, sort of limiting not limiting, but keeping you within a certain area of interest or a certain approach?
I think the collage and painting together is really where my focus is right now. And I think that we had talked earlier about the possibility of the writing of a book and illustration, and I would like that to be the medium in which I create the illustrations. So that's, and I do it several ways. I either put down a layer of collage as almost the underpainting, and then paint the picture on top so that you can still see some of the paper showing through, and that's a part of creating some depth and interest that wouldn't be immediately knowable when you first saw the image. And then sometimes I have the drawing ready and then actually shape the collage to fit the main characters, if you will. But so I might do a combination of both. But I think paper will have.
Well, is there a visual impression that you start with, whichever way you approach it, or? I
found that I could do both. Sometimes I've got the figures all ready to go, and they are on the canvas, the naked canvas, and so I go ahead and add the papers to those. Sometimes I'm not sure where I'm going to go, so I put it off by putting down the layer of paper, and it gives me a chance to begin to think about who will inhabit this particular painting, but it. And sometimes where the paper goes on the canvas. For instance, one of the paintings that's in my studio right now, I saw the bird's eyes because of the papers I had chosen. Hadn't really thought about that before, what was actually going to go on there. But as soon as I saw the birds themselves actually kind of appeared to me, from the depths of the papers. But so, yeah.
Well, it sounds as though you don't have any problem with artist's block, looking at the plain piece of paper. What do I do with this now?
I've developed some skills to trick myself out of it, I think is, that's some of it is, I try a lot of different things to keep myself from getting too stuck.
That's great. You also teach, I understand.
I do.
Adults and children?
Mm-hmm. And I love that. I started teaching when I was first out of college, just regular school, and I love the whole teaching process. I always think I learn as much from them as they learn from me, but it's definitely another kind of conversation. And a lot of my adult students have gotten very stuck because people have told them they can't create, they're not any good, and
that's bad.
And it's hard. And I love encouraging people to let go of some of their anxieties so that they can, really, find their creative self, because I believe everybody's got one.
Well, so often children are just naturally creative, and they have an early experience either in school or at home where somebody says, "Oh, that doesn't look like a tree." Well, what does that do?
Oh, I think it's so damaging,
Yeah.
And, there is also kind of I think it's something like 8 to 12 or 8 to 13. There is a phase that we as humans go through, which is a very self-critical phase, and things, you must follow the rules, and there are things that, this is the way things look. And so if you don't meet those, if you haven't found a way to enjoy your own creations before then, sometimes that can be a tough stage to get through. Your own self is critical.
Yeah, well, art programs in the schools, I think, have a very interesting challenge.
Yes, they do.
Because, first of all, they usually last on the list as far as getting support, funding, and then when they are there, you have to hope that there is someone who is a teacher who is creative and motivating and can give the students something more than, oh, let's draw this now in this way.
Right.
Which is... It will kill creativity.
Right. I mean, there's a
off,
place for that later, maybe, but I think early, giving them materials, teaching them how to use them, and letting them go is really the way to start.
Yeah. So, but so many people don't understand that freedom and don't see the value of it, because everything has to be, you produce this from this effort. And it has to be measurable, and it has to have monetary value, and it has to have all these limitations that keep you from experimenting and being creative and doing a fun thing instead of just, yes, we have to get from this point to this point because you said so.
Right, and it's on the piece of paper that tells what kids are supposed to learn at a particular time. And I do, when I have new students, I tell parents all the time, I say, okay, here's how I approach it. So if you're looking for, a very careful drawing when we're done with this, that's not the way I do things. If that's the way your child expresses themselves creatively, okay, but that's not my expectation, for them. That my expectation is that they learn about materials, that they play, that they, enjoy, that they don't worry, they have no fears when they create. So,
well, that I think is the thing that makes your work so much fun, and coming into your studio is such a pleasure. It really does give you something. Give the person who enters an immediate reaction. I mean, you don't have to look for it. It's there, and there is so much to see and things to handle. And
I do like the touch.
You don't have any do not touch signs.
No, I like the touch. I do, and it's when someone walks in my studio and laughs out loud, that's like the best present, because that's exactly what I hope will happen. So.
And of course, that kind of freedom to invite people who come into Liberty Town is typical of what happens here, and why this is such an important entity and has contributed so much to the community. It's really very exciting. For any people who may not know yet where Liberty Town is, just talk about where it is, how to get here. It's a little bit of a challenge. You have to know which street to turn on, and it's partially because there's so many one-way streets.
That's right. Let's see. So usually I say it's behind Maury School, and near the Freelance Star. But I'll talk about if you come into town on William Street. And head for the river, you're going to make a right on Prince Edward, a right on George, and a right on
Right
Liberty
there.
Street, and it's just a block long.
That's right.
But it's
That's
the best
right.
block in town. As far as
Exactly.
can say.
And it is indeed the best block in town. It's wonderful. From the old hardware store, a very
right.
practical entity, to a wonderful gallery space and studio space. It's been a great accomplishment here. I think this is fabulous. Well, Elizabeth, I certainly have had a pleasure talking to you about your work. The wonderful thing about talking to individual artists is that they all are very different, and they all approach their work very differently, and give us an opportunity to see their work very differently, which I think is a marvelous experience. So we will have to do a lot of visiting to your studio and the gallery
You're
as a whole.
welcome. Thank you.
Incidentally, when is it open? What are the hours?
We're open every day, Monday through Thursday. We're open 10 to 6. Friday and Saturday 10 to 5, and Sunday 12 to 4.
Wonderful.
And
So
most days, we just take a few days off during the year. So
yeah, that's
Yeah,
great.
yeah.
That is great. And you can see artists here who are working,
Yes.
which is such fun.
That's right.
I don't know that they necessarily have regular hours that you can expect to find them here, but almost always there's somebody
That's right.
working in a studio when you come in, and it's wonderful to see the creative process.
First Fridays are a good time to meet
Yes.
a larger group.
That's true.
We have First Fridays every month.
And there is always a new
New
exhibition.
exhibit in the main gallery.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. So that is something to look forward to
That's
as
right.
well.
That's right.
Well, I thank you so much for giving this opportunity to talk with you today. It was much fun, and always enjoy speaking with you. I'm just trying to wander into your studio. Hi, buy another card.
That's right. That's good. I'm always welcome you.
But especially to talk to you and find out about how you approach your work, which I think is most interesting to us.
Thank you very much for interviewing me. I appreciate it. It was very fun.
Thank you. We were very pleased to have an opportunity to talk to artist Elizabeth Seaver. This is Debbie Klein inviting you to join us again.